Marcus Johnson moved quietly through the evening shadows of downtown Chicago. At 42, his calm eyes missed nothing as he walked with purpose, his athletic build hidden under a simple gray jacket. People passed by without noticing him, exactly as he preferred after 15 years as a CIA operative. Tonight, Marcus was back in his hometown on assignment. A suspected terrorist cell had been detected operating in Chicago, and his superiors needed someone who knew the city's streets like the back of their hand. Marcus fit the bill perfectly. "Target is moving east on Madison," he whispered into his hidden microphone. Back at the temporary command center, his words appeared as text on a screen monitored by his team. Marcus slipped into his car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic, chosen specifically because it attracted no attention. He kept his distance as he followed a man the agency had been watching for weeks. The suspect turned down a quiet street in Oakwood Heights, an affluent, predominantly white neighborhood where Marcus stood out simply because of his skin color. As darkness fell, Marcus parked across from a small cafe where the target had entered. He reached for his camera with the long-range lens and began taking photographs. The cafe windows provided a clear view of the suspect meeting with two unknown individuals. Marcus documented everything, each click of the shutter another piece of evidence. His phone vibrated. It was Patricia Wells, his direct supervisor at Langley. "Johnson, report," she said. "Target is meeting with two unidentified males," Marcus replied quietly, "getting clear images now. They're exchanging something, looks like documents." "Good work. Get what you can and pull back. We'll analyze overnight and regroup tomorrow." Marcus acknowledged and continued his surveillance. After 20 minutes, the meeting inside the cafe appeared to end. He stored his camera in a locked case and prepared to follow if necessary. That's when he noticed the police cruiser pulling up behind him, lights flashing. Marcus took a deep breath. This was an annoyance, but not unusual. He had been profiled by police before, even in his hometown. As a black man in an expensive neighborhood after dark, he knew the drill. He put both hands on the steering wheel where they could be seen and waited. Two white officers approached, one on each side of his car. The taller one, whose nameplate read Daniels, shined a flashlight directly into Marcus's eyes. "License and registration," Officer Daniels demanded, his tone immediately hostile. Marcus moved slowly. "Of course, officer. My license is in my wallet, and registration is in the glove compartment. I'm going to reach for them now." "Just hurry up," said the second officer, Reynolds, watching Marcus's every move with suspicion. As Marcus handed over his documents, Officer Daniels studied them with narrowed eyes. "What are you doing in this neighborhood at this hour?" "Just passing through on my way home, sir," Marcus answered, giving the cover story he had prepared. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area," Reynolds said, peering into the back seat of Marcus's car. His flashlight beam caught the edge of the locked camera case. "What's in the case?" Marcus remained calm. "Just some work equipment." "Step out of the vehicle, sir," Daniels ordered suddenly. Marcus knew better than to argue. As a CIA operative, he was trained to handle much worse situations than this. He would comply, remain polite, and be on his way soon enough. But something in the officer's expressions told him this wasn't going to be a routine stop. As he carefully stepped out onto the pavement, Marcus had no idea that his life was about to change dramatically in the next few hours. The cool night air hit Marcus's face as he stood beside his car. Officer Daniels positioned himself uncomfortably close, while Officer Reynolds circled around, his hand resting on his holster. "Hands against the vehicle," Daniels ordered, his voice sharp. Marcus complied without protest. He had been trained to assess threats quickly, and these officers were showing all the signs of escalation. Something wasn't right. They hadn't even told him why they pulled him over. "What seems to be the problem, officers?" Marcus asked calmly as Daniels began patting him down. "We've had reports of drug activity in this area," Reynolds replied, watching Marcus with narrowed eyes. "And you fit the description of someone we're looking for." Marcus knew this was false. It was the standard line used countless times when officers wanted an excuse to search someone who looked out of place. "I assure you, I'm just passing through," Marcus explained evenly. "I haven't done anything wrong." Daniels pulled Marcus's wallet from his pocket and flipped through it, removing his CIA identification card hidden behind his driver's license. The officer glanced at it briefly, then slipped it into his own pocket without comment. Marcus noticed this sleight of hand that remained silent, mentally recording every detail. "We're going to search your vehicle," Reynolds announced, already opening the back door. "Do you have a warrant?" Marcus asked. "Or probable cause?" This question seemed to anger Daniels, who suddenly grabbed Marcus's arm and twisted it behind his back. "You being difficult," Daniels growled. "Because that's how people end up in trouble." Marcus recognized the threat but remained composed. "I'm not being difficult, sir. I'm simply asking about my rights." Reynolds had already reached the locked case in the back seat. "What's in here?" "Open it." "That contains sensitive work equipment," Marcus replied truthfully. "I'd prefer not to open it without." Before he could finish, Daniels slammed him against the car hood. "We got a problem here, Reynolds. I think our friend is hiding something." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. Marcus calculated his options. Revealing his true identity would compromise his mission, potentially endangering national security. These officers were clearly looking to escalate, not de-escalate. "Look in the glove box," Reynolds called out after finding Marcus's car keys. "There might be something there." Daniels kept Marcus pinned while Reynolds searched. Marcus watched in the side mirror as Reynolds opened the glove compartment, paused, then reached in with a strange smile on his face. Well, what do we have here?" Reynolds turned, holding up a small bag containing white powder that Marcus had never seen before. "Looks like someone's been naughty." Marcus's heart sank. He was being framed, plain and simple. "That's not mine," he stated firmly. "I've never seen that before." "That's what they all say," Daniels laughed, roughly handcuffing Marcus. "Marcus Johnson, you're under arrest for possession of a controlled substance." As the officers led him to the police cruiser, Marcus noticed a neighbor watching from a nearby porch, phone in hand. That witness could be important later. "You're making a mistake," Marcus said quietly. "The only mistake was you driving through this neighborhood thinking you could sell your drugs here," Reynolds replied, pushing Marcus into the back seat. As the cruiser pulled away, Marcus took slow, measured breaths. His mission was now compromised, but a new challenge had emerged. These officers had no idea who they were dealing with, or the resources that would soon be mobilized when he missed his check-in. Inside the police car, Marcus observed the officers in the front seat exchanging satisfied glances. They believed they had just made a simple drug bust. They couldn't have been more wrong. The harsh fluorescent lights of the police station buzzed overhead as Marcus sat handcuffed to a metal table in the interrogation room. 3 hours had passed since his arrest. He had been photographed, fingerprinted, and searched. Through it all, Marcus remained silent except to request his phone call, a request that had been repeatedly ignored. Officer Daniels entered the room, carrying a manila folder and the locked case from Marcus's car. He slammed both onto the table and took a seat across from Marcus. "So, Mr. Johnson," Daniels said with a smirk, "want to tell us what's really going on? We found cocaine in your car, and I'm betting there's more in this fancy case of yours." Marcus looked directly into Daniels' eyes. "I'd like to make my phone call, as is my right." Daniels laughed. "You'll get your call when I say so. Now, what's the password for this case?" "I want to speak to a lawyer," Marcus replied calmly. The door opened and Officer Reynolds walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Daniels but offered nothing to Marcus. "The password," Reynolds demanded, leaning against the wall. "Or we'll have to break it open. Your choice." Marcus knew the case contained sensitive surveillance equipment that would reveal his identity and mission. He also knew the officers were building a case against him, one fabricated from the beginning. "I cannot provide that information," Marcus stated firmly. Daniels sighed dramatically and nodded to Reynolds, who took the case and left the room. A few minutes later, the sound of metal being forced echoed from somewhere down the hall. "Looks like we're doing this the hard way," Daniels said. He opened the folder and pushed a document toward Marcus. "This is your statement. Sign it." Marcus glanced at the paper. It was a confession stating he had been caught selling drugs in Oakwood Heights. Marcus pushed it back without reading further. "I won't sign a false confession," he said. Daniel's face hardened. "Listen, you can make this easy or hard. Sign the paper, and maybe the judge goes easy on you. Don't sign, and we'll add resisting arrest, assaulting an officer, We can make quite a list. Marcus remained silent, his trained mind working to document every violation of protocol for later use. Reynolds returned with the now damaged case. Inside were Marcus's high-end camera, several small recording devices, and a secure laptop, all standard CIA surveillance equipment. Well, Reynolds whistled, examining the equipment. Fancy stuff for a drug dealer. What are you really up to, Johnson? I'd like my phone call, Marcus repeated. Reynolds ignored him and continued searching through the case. After a few minutes, he pulled out a small plastic bag containing white powder, identical to the one found in Marcus's glove compartment. Look what we have here, Reynolds announced triumphantly, holding up the bag. More cocaine hidden among all this fancy spy gear. Marcus's jaw tightened. He had watched Reynolds plant the evidence right in front of him, knowing the interrogation room camera would be positioned to miss this sleight of hand. That wasn't in there, Marcus stated firmly. Camera doesn't lie, Daniels said, pointing to Marcus's own surveillance equipment. You were recording your drug deals, weren't you? Smart business practice, until you got caught. Marcus realized they were constructing an elaborate frame. He wasn't just a drug user, but a dealer who recorded his transactions. His own equipment was being used against him. As the officers left with smug expressions, Marcus heard them talking in the hallway. Open and shut case, Daniels was saying. Drug dealer with fancy recording equipment, caught red-handed. Judge Williams will love this one, Reynolds replied. He'll put this guy away for years. Alone in the room, Marcus closed his eyes briefly. By now, he would have missed his scheduled check-in with Director Wells. Protocol would be initiated to locate him. The question was whether help would arrive before these corrupt officers completed their frame-up. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight. Marcus knew the next few hours would be critical. Director Patricia Wells paced the secure operations room at CIA headquarters, her face tight with concern. The large digital clock on the wall showed that Marcus Johnson was now 4 hours late for his check-in. On the screens around her, analysts worked frantically to determine his whereabouts. Anything from his tracking device? Wells asked, her voice sharp with worry. Last signal was from the Oakwood Heights neighborhood in Chicago, Director, replied Agent Tanner, typing rapidly at his keyboard. Then it went dead around 9:30 p.m. Wells frowned. Marcus was one of her best operatives, disciplined, careful, and always reliable. If he had gone dark, something was seriously wrong. Check police reports, hospital admissions, traffic cameras, everything, she ordered. And get our Chicago field office involved. I want answers within the hour. Across town in the Chicago Police Department holding cells, Marcus sat on a metal bench, his back against the cold concrete wall. The cell was small and smelled of bleach and sweat. 2 other men shared the space with him, a drunk who snored loudly on the opposite bench, and a young man who kept his head down, refusing to make eye contact. The sound of footsteps approaching made Marcus look up. A woman in her mid-30s wearing a rumpled suit appeared at the bars, clipboard in hand. Marcus Johnson, she called. Marcus stood and approached the bars. Yes. I'm Sarah Turner, public defender, she said, her voice low and efficient. I've been assigned to your case. The guard unlocked the cell and led them to a small consultation room with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 plastic chairs. You've been charged with possession of a controlled substance with intent to distribute, Sarah said, laying out papers on the table. The police report states they found cocaine in your vehicle and more in your equipment case during a routine traffic stop. None of that is true, Marcus stated firmly. Those officers planted evidence and denied me my phone call for hours. Sarah had heard similar claims countless times, but something about Marcus's calm demeanor caught her attention. Unlike most clients, he didn't seem desperate or afraid, just methodical in his denial. The report says you were acting suspiciously in a high-end neighborhood, she continued, reading from the file. Taking photographs of residences. Care to explain that? Marcus chose his words carefully. I was conducting legitimate business. The equipment they seized is for my work. What kind of work requires surveillance equipment and puts you in wealthy neighborhoods at night? Sarah asked, raising an eyebrow. Before Marcus could answer, the door opened. A uniformed officer handed Sarah a piece of paper. What's this? She asked. Just came in. Full drug test results for your client, the officer replied before leaving. Sarah scanned the paper, her brow furrowing in confusion. This says you tested negative for all substances. No cocaine, no marijuana, nothing in your system. Something didn't add up. The police claimed Marcus was a drug dealer caught with cocaine, yet his system was completely clean. That's because I don't use drugs, Marcus said simply. Look, Ms. Turner, I need to make a phone call. Just one call, and I can clear this up. Sarah studied him, her legal instincts awakening. The arresting officers, Daniels and Reynolds. Their report has inconsistencies. They claim they found drugs in plain sight, yet the dashboard camera footage isn't included in the file. Because they turned their cameras off, Marcus explained. Check the timeline. There's probably a gap in the recording. Sarah made a note. I'll request the complete footage. Now, about that phone call. Meanwhile, back at CIA headquarters, Agent Tanner burst into Director Wells' office. We found him, he announced breathlessly. Johnson was arrested by Chicago PD last night on drug charges. He's being held downtown. Wells' eyes narrowed. Drug charges? That's ridiculous. She reached for her secure phone. Get me the deputy director. We need to move carefully here. If Johnson is maintaining his cover, we don't want to blow his operation. But if he's been framed... Her voice trailed off as she considered the implications. Should we send a team? Tanner asked. Not yet. Wells decided. First, I need to make some calls. Find out exactly what we're dealing with. As Wells picked up the phone, the wheels of a very different kind of intelligence operation began to turn. Director Patricia Wells sat alone in her office, blinds drawn against the morning sun. On her desk lay 2 folders, one red, one blue. The red contained details of the terrorist cell Marcus had been tracking in Chicago. The blue held everything her team had gathered about Marcus's arrest and the officers involved. She picked up the blue folder and flipped through the pages again. Officers Daniels and Reynolds had troubling histories. Multiple civilian complaints about racial profiling, excessive force, and 3 previous cases thrown out due to evidence mishandling, all involving black suspects. Her secure phone rang. Wells, she answered. Director, it's Tanner. We got something you need to see. Minutes later, Wells was watching grainy footage from a traffic camera located near where Marcus had been arrested. The angle was poor, but clear enough to show officers Daniels and Reynolds pulling over Marcus's car. More importantly, it showed Reynolds opening his own police cruiser's trunk before approaching Marcus's vehicle. Look there, Tanner pointed. He takes something from his trunk before searching Johnson's car. Plant evidence much? Wells muttered. What about Marcus's mission? Any updates? The surveillance photos we recovered from his cloud backup show the suspect's meeting with a new player, Tanner explained, sliding over another folder. Russian intelligence, we think. This is bigger than we thought. Wells faced her dilemma. Extracting Marcus would likely expose him as CIA, potentially compromising the entire operation. But leaving him in custody meant an innocent man, her agent, could go to prison on false charges. She made her decision. Get me the Attorney General on the phone, she ordered. And prepare a limited disclosure package on Johnson. Minimal details, just enough to establish his identity without compromising operational security. After ending the call, Wells looked out her window at the Washington skyline. Let's see how these officers react when they discover who they've been messing with. In Chicago, Sarah Turner was having a breakthrough morning. The judge had granted her motion to review all body camera footage from Marcus's arrest. Footage the prosecutor had initially claimed was unavailable due to technical issues. Technical issues, my ass, Sarah muttered as she watched the video in the court's review room. The footage showed clear discrepancies. The officers' cameras mysteriously turned off just before the search of Marcus's car, then reactivated after the alleged drugs were found. Even more damning, during a brief moment when Officer Reynolds forgot his camera was recording, she caught him saying to Daniels, "This guy's not gonna know what hit him. Teach him to drive through Oakwood." Sarah scribbled furious notes. This was textbook misconduct. Racial profiling followed by evidence tampering. She could get the case thrown out, maybe even file civil rights violations against the department. The door opened, and a court clerk handed her a message. "Miss Turner, You have a visitor regarding the Johnson case. Says it's urgent. Sarah found a well-dressed woman waiting in the consultation room. Her posture was military straight, her expression unreadable. I'm Sarah Turner, Mr. Johnson's attorney. She introduced herself. Patricia Wells, the woman replied, offering a business card that simply listed her name and a government phone number. I need to speak with you about your client. Are you family? Because I can only discuss. I'm his employer, Wells interrupted, placing a sealed envelope on the table. This contains information that will be relevant to his case. It's been cleared by the Attorney General for limited disclosure to you and the judge only. Sarah opened the envelope cautiously, then froze as she read the contents. Her eyes widened. Is this for real? She whispered. Very real, Wells confirmed. Mr. Johnson was operating in an official capacity. Those drug-dealing tools are government property, and the substances allegedly found in his possession were planted. Sarah looked up from the documents, her mind racing with implications. This changes everything. Yes, Wells agreed. But we need to handle this carefully. I suggest you request an immediate emergency hearing with the judge. In chambers, away from the press. The preliminary hearing is scheduled for tomorrow morning, Sarah replied, already gathering her papers. Perfect. Wells nodded. I'll be there. And Miss Turner? Prepare for fireworks. Those officers have no idea what's coming. The Cook County Courthouse buzzed with morning activity as Marcus Johnson, dressed in an orange jumpsuit, was led into courtroom 305. His wrists were cuffed in front of him, but he walked with his head high, eyes forward. He noticed Sarah Turner already at the defense table, organizing papers with focused energy. On the prosecution side sat Assistant District Attorney Kevin Barnes, a thin man with slick back hair who was busy typing on his laptop. He barely looked up as Marcus entered. Officers Daniels and Reynolds sat in the front row behind the prosecution, looking confident and relaxed. Daniels whispered something to Reynolds that made both men chuckle. They had done this many times before. Judge Eleanor Montgomery, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, entered the courtroom. Everyone rose as the bailiff called. All rise for the Honorable Judge Montgomery. Be seated, she instructed, adjusting her robe. Case number 2025 CR 4872, People v. Marcus Johnson. Preliminary hearing on charges of possession of controlled substances with intent to distribute. Are both parties ready to proceed? Ready for the prosecution, Your Honor, Barnes stated, standing. Ready for the defense, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the nervous energy Marcus could sense in her movements. Judge Montgomery glanced at her notes. Mr. Barnes, call your first witness. The people call Officer James Daniels, Barnes announced. Daniels strode to the witness stand with confidence, was sworn in, and took his seat. Barnes guided him through his testimony with practiced ease. Officer Daniels, could you describe the events of April 2nd that led to the defendant's arrest? Daniels leaned slightly toward the microphone. At approximately 9:15 p.m., Officer Reynolds and I observed a suspicious vehicle parked in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood. The driver, identified as Marcus Johnson, appeared to be conducting surveillance of homes in the area. What happened next? Barnes prompted. We approached the vehicle and asked Mr. Johnson for identification. He seemed nervous and evasive. When we noticed a suspicious case in his back seat, we asked about its contents. His answers were inconsistent, raising our suspicions further. Marcus watched as Daniels continued his well-rehearsed lies, describing how they discovered cocaine in the glove compartment and more in his equipment case. The officer's testimony painted Marcus as a sophisticated drug dealer using photography equipment as a cover. When Officer Reynolds took the stand next, his testimony perfectly matched his partner's account. Too perfectly, Sarah had noted in her preparations. No further questions, Your Honor, Barnes finally concluded, looking pleased with himself. Judge Montgomery turned to Sarah. Cross-examination, Ms. Turner? Sarah stood slowly. Yes, Your Honor. She approached Reynolds, who still sat in the witness box. Officer Reynolds, you testified that you and Officer Daniels followed proper procedure during Mr. Johnson's arrest, correct? Yes, ma'am, Reynolds replied confidently, including maintaining active body cameras throughout the encounter. He hesitated slightly. There was a technical malfunction, but... Your Honor, Sarah interrupted. I'd like to present Defense Exhibit A, the restored body camera footage from Officer Reynolds' camera. Barnes jumped to his feet. Objection. This wasn't provided in discovery. Because your office claimed it didn't exist, Sarah countered. The defense obtained it through a court order yesterday. Judge Montgomery frowned. Overruled. Proceed, Ms. Turner. Sarah played a short clip showing Reynolds clearly turning off his camera before searching Marcus's car. Officer, would you explain why you manually disabled your body camera before conducting the search? Sarah asked. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. I thought it was malfunctioning. Before Sarah could continue her questioning, the courtroom doors opened. A woman in a tailored navy suit walked confidently down the center aisle. Your Honor, Sarah said, the defense calls Patricia Wells. Barnes looked confused. Your Honor, this witness wasn't on the list. Late addition, Your Honor, Sarah explained. Critical to establishing the truth about Mr. Johnson's activities that night. Judge Montgomery considered for a moment. I'll allow it, but this better be relevant, Counselor. As Patricia Wells was sworn in, Marcus sat up straighter. The officer's confident expressions began to falter as they sensed the unexpected turn the hearing was taking. Wells took the stand, her presence commanding the courtroom's attention. No one, least of all Officers Daniels and Reynolds, was prepared for what she was about to reveal. The courtroom fell silent as Patricia Wells settled into the witness stand. Her posture was perfect, her gaze direct and unwavering. Judge Montgomery studied the new witness with curiosity. Please state your name and occupation for the record, Sarah Turner requested. My name is Patricia Wells. I am the Deputy Director of Operations for the Central Intelligence Agency, Wells stated clearly. A wave of whispers swept through the courtroom. Officer Daniels straightened in his seat, while Reynolds' face paled visibly. At the prosecution table, Barnes shuffled his papers nervously, clearly unprepared for this development. Objection. Barnes jumped to his feet. This is some kind of stunt. We need verification of this witness's identity. Wells calmly reached into her jacket pocket and removed a leather credential wallet. Your Honor, I have my identification here, which you may examine. I've also brought a letter from the Attorney General confirming my identity and position. Judge Montgomery accepted the documents, examining them carefully before looking up with widened eyes. The identification appears authentic. I'll allow the testimony to continue. She handed the credentials back to Wells. Ms. Wells, Sarah continued, do you know the defendant, Marcus Johnson? Yes, I do. Marcus Johnson is a senior operations officer with the Central Intelligence Agency. He has served our country for 15 years, including 3 overseas deployments in high-risk environments. He has received multiple commendations for his service. Marcus watched as the faces of Officers Daniels and Reynolds transformed from confidence to confusion to dawning horror. And was Mr. Johnson working in an official capacity on the night of April 2nd when he was arrested? Sarah asked. Yes. Agent Johnson was conducting authorized surveillance as part of an ongoing national security investigation. Wells turned slightly to address the judge directly. The details of this operation remain classified, Your Honor, but I am authorized to confirm that Agent Johnson was acting within the scope of his duties. The prosecutor stood again, his face flushed. Your Honor, even if the defendant is a federal agent, that doesn't explain the narcotics found in his possession. I was getting to that, Wells replied coolly. She removed a folder from her briefcase and handed it to the bailiff. These are the results of forensic analysis conducted on the substances allegedly found in Agent Johnson's vehicle and equipment case. Sarah took the report from the bailiff and presented it to the judge. Your Honor, the CIA's laboratory has determined that the fingerprints on the bags containing cocaine belong exclusively to Officers Daniels and Reynolds. Agent Johnson's prints are not present on any of the evidence. A collective gasp filled the courtroom. Judge Montgomery's expression hardened as she reviewed the report. Furthermore, Wells continued, Agent Johnson's equipment case contained a backup recording device that captured audio even when closed. I'd like to play a short excerpt with the court's permission. Judge Montgomery nodded grimly. Proceed. Sarah connected a small device to the courtroom's sound system. The voice of Officer Reynolds filled the room clearly. "Plant the stuff in the case. Make sure it's deep inside so it looks hidden. This guy's going away for a long time." Officer Daniels could be heard responding. "You think anyone's gonna believe a black guy in Oakwood over us? Please." The color drained completely from both officers' faces. Reynolds began whispering urgently to his attorney, while Daniels sat frozen in his seat. "Your Honor," Wells said firmly, "the Central Intelligence Agency respectfully requests all charges against Agent Johnson be dismissed immediately. The evidence clearly shows he was framed by these officers while performing his duties protecting national security." Judge Montgomery removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose, visibly disturbed by what she had heard. "Mr. Barnes," she addressed the prosecutor, "does the state have any response to this evidence?" The prosecutor stood slowly, defeated. "In light of this new information, Your Honor, the state moves to dismiss all charges against the defendant." Judge Montgomery nodded. "So ordered." She turned her stern gaze to the two officers. "And I am ordering an immediate investigation into Officers Daniels and Reynolds. Bailiff, please detain these officers on suspicion of evidence tampering, false imprisonment, and obstruction of justice." As court officers moved toward Daniels and Reynolds, Marcus finally allowed himself a small smile. The truth had come to light. Justice, delayed but not denied, was finally being served. 3 months after the dramatic courtroom revelation, Marcus Johnson sat across from Director Wells in a quiet corner of a Washington, D.C. cafe. He looked different now, more relaxed in casual clothes, his face no longer bearing the tension of recent events. "How's the new assignment?" Wells asked, stirring her coffee. Marcus smiled slightly. "Desk duty has its advantages. I get to sleep in my own bed every night." After the case dismissal, Marcus had been reassigned to CIA headquarters. His cover in Chicago had been partially compromised, making field operations temporarily impossible. Though he sometimes missed the adrenaline of undercover work, the break had been welcome. "The terrorism cell you were tracking, we got them," Wells informed him quietly. "Your initial surveillance provided the breakthrough we needed. 10 arrests last week." Marcus nodded with satisfaction. At least his work hadn't been for nothing, despite the personal cost. "And what about Officers Daniels and Reynolds?" he asked, his expression turning serious. Wells set down her cup. "They're facing federal charges for civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and obstruction of justice. The FBI investigation revealed this wasn't their first time. They had a pattern going back years, targeting black men in white neighborhoods, planting evidence, falsifying reports." "How many cases?" Marcus asked, though he suspected the answer. 27 confirmed so far," Wells replied gravely. "The district attorney's office is reviewing every arrest they ever made. At least 15 people have already been released from prison." Marcus shook his head slowly. The scope of the injustice was staggering, yet sadly unsurprising. What made his case different wasn't the officers' actions, but simply who they had chosen to target. "The Chicago Police Department is under a federal consent decree now," Wells continued. "New training protocols, independent oversight, body cameras that officers can't disable. Your case was the catalyst for real change." Outside the cafe window, people walked by, unaware of the conversation taking place just feet away. Marcus watched them for a moment, thinking about how different his life might have been without his CIA credentials backing him up. "Sarah Turner called," Marcus mentioned. "She's representing several of the other victims in civil suits against the department. She said what happened to me helped break the blue wall of silence. Other officers have started coming forward about misconduct they witnessed." Wells nodded. "Sometimes it takes one high-profile case to crack open a system." "I got lucky," Marcus said quietly. "If I wasn't CIA, I'd probably be sitting in a cell right now. How many Marcus Johnsons are out there without the power of a federal agency behind them?" The question hung in the air between them. Both knew the answer. "The Attorney General asked if you consider joining a new Justice Department task force," Wells said finally. "Investigating police misconduct across major cities. Your experience makes you uniquely qualified." Marcus looked surprised. "Leave the agency?" "Think of it as a special assignment," Wells replied. "Your CIA experience, combined with what you went through personally, you could make a difference in ways few others could." Marcus gazed out the window again, considering the offer. His ordeal had changed him, opened his eyes to injustices that had always existed, but that he had been somewhat insulated from in his CIA role. "I'll think about it," he said finally. As they left the cafe, Marcus noticed a newspaper stand with headlines about police reform legislation moving through Congress. A smaller headline mentioned the ongoing investigation into Chicago PD. His personal nightmare had transformed into something larger than himself, a chance for real systemic change. Marcus turned to Wells. "Tell the Attorney General I'm interested, but I want to help design the program, not just participate in it." Wells smiled. "I thought you might say that. He's expecting your call tomorrow." As they parted ways on the busy street, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in months: purpose. The truth had not only set him free, but had given him a new mission, one that might help ensure others received the justice that had almost been denied to them.